Welcome to this episode of Think Business. Really looking forward to my talk with Steve Sallen. Steve, it's great to see you. It's always great to see you. Steve, I want to start here. You joined Maddin Hauser law firm as a law clerk in 1983. Today, you're the president and CEO of the firm. And your website can be found at maddinhauser.com. Your firm does phenomenal work. But I want to kind of start talking about instant versus delayed gratification. So many people today and I'm exaggerating a little bit, want to start as the law clerk in 1983 and be the president and CEO in 1983.
Be careful what you wish for.
So I want to talk about delayed gratification, and it's great to see someone who has so much lineage within the organization. But just take the Think community back to 1983, and just what your mindset was then.
Well, thank you and hello. Glad to be here and participate with you in this podcast. So thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
In 1983, my mindset was, boy, I'm going to graduate law school next year, and I really should have a job. I had worked, I had never worked in law. I didn't know anything about law except for what I had studied so far in law school. I mean, I was as unknowledgeable as a person could be.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I had a lot of knowledge in other areas that have stood me well over time, such as construction. My family was in the construction business, and I would work in the summer in the ironworker trade.
Oh, wow.
And I like to tell people to this day that everything of importance that I learned in life was learned over those 3 or 4 summers when I was an ironworker for Acorn Ironworks. So I needed a job. I wanted a job. I wanted to find a place that perhaps could turn into a career. But I wasn't thinking that I would be in one place for 40 years. I was thinking, I wanted to find a good law firm that would pay me enough money to buy a house and live and buy groceries, and get some experience.
Yeah.
And so my forward look was not very far forward at that point.
All right. I think I like that answer. And so let's just talk about maybe some of the fundamentals on how you began to execute, and maybe some of the fundamentals, like you shared, you learned as an iron worker, right? So how did you take some of that skill set and put it into your day-to-day?
Well, I mean, first of all, I learned there was a whole lot of things I didn't want to do with the rest of my life, right? I mean, it's a very dangerous and physically difficult trade, although enormously well paying. As a young 20-something, I had lots of disposable cash because I was living at home and earning a lot of money over the summer, and I could buy, I bought a boat, a car, and all kinds of things. But I knew that, as much money as I was making, that was not where I would, where I wanted to top out.
Yeah.
And I knew that, I wanted to, put on a suit and go to work. My dad put on a suit and went to work. He was an engineer, by trade, and a businessman by experience. And I wanted to do that. So being an iron worker taught me a lot about people, a lot about hard work, a lot about literally getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
And a lot about just life. I met so many people from all different backgrounds and all different races and all different viewpoints. And, I hated every minute of it, and I absolutely loved every minute of it. It's kind of hard to explain unless you've done something like and had the good fortune and the and the good luck to be able to do something like that. I run into attorneys all the time. I do real estate law, as you know, and a lot of that involves construction. And so often I'm on the telephone or in a meeting with an attorney who has no idea what goes on a construction site. Now, they've read cases and they've, sat behind their desk and talked about it, but they don't know.
Yeah.
I come from a place that, not that I had enormous experience, but I did have a fair amount. I mean, if you back to back to back all of the weeks and months that I spent on the job, I probably spent a year in the field working in construction, and at times was a dangerous profession or vocation. And I learned a lot. And sometimes what you need to know isn't in the law books, or in the business books. It's in the School of Hard Knocks and the Book of Life.
Yeah. I love that. I agree with that. I was talking to somebody today. I was talking to a client right before this, our talk, and he was talking about a transformation he had gone through over the last couple of years that we were just reflecting on. And we were talking about how everything he went through, you can read books to help you along the way, but you can't read in a book what he went through. I agree with that. I was in commercial real estate for a long time. That's how I met you. One of the things that I was always impressed on, I'm 52 as we record this now, but when I was in the real estate business and commercial real estate, I was 30 when I got into the business. And one thing I want to talk a little bit about the old school of how you kind of, work as well. One of the things I was always so impressed with you was when I was 30 getting into the commercial real estate business, there were so many people, I don't want to say so many people, I don't want to over exaggerate it, but there were handfuls of people that because I was new wouldn't talk to me. Some of the bankers and lenders, attorneys, because I would reach out to so many people to build my network of resources and knowledge. You were always a proactive person. You were always calling to set up breakfasts with me, with other agents in the office. You were always inclusive, always a resource, and not just to me, to I would say many people, many people, dozens, if not more, in the real estate community. And so just talk about kind of, because I think even today that, 22 years later, that's rare that someone puts themselves out there like that as this resource. Just talk about the old schoolness of that, because I really believe that old school it still works.
Yeah, I agree. I think old school, and I think we need to get back to old school.
Yeah.
But I found, and listen, I mean, I didn't invent this. I had wonderful mentors and coaches along the way. And it was hammered home to me that, you don't just chase who you think are the big hitters. Be nice to everybody. You never know when some young real estate broker that you meet is going to turn out to be a really big deal a few years down the road.
Yeah.
And can help you. And I took the approach that I wasn't going to, I never ranked people. I didn't, these are all the big hitters, and I want to prioritize them. And then there's the lesser lights, and I'm going to deprioritize them. I never, ever did that.
Yeah.
Anybody that was willing to meet with me, I was willing to meet with them, and just to see if there was some synergy, to see if there was, some friendship. I mean, listen, real estate law is kind of a tough business. It helps to have friends and people who know you. And over the years, I was fortunate enough to be able to build up some trust by treating everybody the right way, treating people the way I wanted to be treated. And to that end, I think I have a very good reputation, and I have some tremendous loyal friends who have been clients and tremendous referral sources over the years. And, and sometimes some of the biggest referrals I've had in my career came from people that you wouldn't think that they were necessarily a particularly happening broker, if I can use that term.
Yeah.
But they knew somebody who was a client who turned out to be an enormous client.
Yeah.
For me. And so if you want to be a snob about it, I would say it's probably not going to work out too well.
Yeah.
If you want to be generous about it, it'll probably work out a whole lot better.
Yeah, I love that. I love that answer. I think community, we talk a lot about kindness on this podcast. That doesn't mean you can't be firm. That doesn't mean you can't be direct. That doesn't mean you can't be real. But kindness is free, and it goes a long, long way. Steve, you've as long as I've known you for 22 plus years, you've always been kind. And what I appreciate about what you just shared is you walk the talk. I mean that is who you are. I want to go back a little bit to a comment you made about your dad. You know, you just walked him. You know, he put his jacket on, he put his coat on, and he went to work. And what else did you learn from your dad?
Be yourself. Be tough, because the world is a tough place. But that doesn't mean I certainly learned, do not ever lie, do not ever steal. The word integrity is absolutely the thing that I strive for every day. When I get up and go to work in the morning, the one thing I'm not going to leave, on my counter is my integrity. I take it with me. And I think I learned that from my dad. Yeah.
Good.
He was a very tough guy, but he was a very fair guy.
Yeah.
And the company that he owned was a union shop, and I remember going to his funeral in 1981, and some union bosses, if you will, were truly upset and sad that my dad had passed, because he was an adversary, but he was an honest and a fair adversary.
Yeah.
He was a good person, and they knew that. And if he said something, he meant it. And if he didn't say something, then they weren't going to pry it out of him either.
I love that. That's great. Good. I feel like I got to know your dad a little bit just now. Let's go back to 1983. You're starting at Maddin. You're kind of in the moment. Where did it begin to shift for you? Thinking, I'm gonna be here for a while, and then the next shift of, I think I'm ready to be the president and CEO of this firm and lead.
Oh boy. I don't know that there's ever a day that you wake up and say something like that. I will say this. In about 1991, I think that's when I became a partner. I'd been with the firm for 7 years or so. And one of the other junior partners at the time, it was like the day of the first partner meeting I was going to go to, right?
Yeah.
And this other young junior partner comes to me and he says, "Now, Steve, if you're smart, you'll follow my advice." He says, "I wouldn't say anything in a partner meeting for about a year. Just kind of get to know what's going on before you open your mouth." And I thought, that's interesting. And I opened up my mouth from the very first minute of the very first partner meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't hold back, even though I had been counseled by one of my peers that I should hold back. And I don't hold back. And I can remember in law school, there were times when I just refused to hold back. If I have something on my mind, I will say it. Now, having said that, I'm also mindful of a slogan of my grandfather, which I think is really important. And my grandfather would say, empty wagons rattle. And so I always made sure, and I still make sure, if I have something to say, it better be an intelligent something. Otherwise, shut your mouth and listen.
Yeah.
What do they say? You have one mouth and two ears, use them in that proportion.
Yeah.
And I try to do that. But if I have something to say, I have never found it productive or useful to hold back.
Yeah. Good. I think today it's interesting. I want to talk to the kind of the younger generations right now. Um, One of the things I see and hear when I talk to the younger generation is they're very outspoken. They're sharing their whole stories online, but yet when it comes to the real life stuff, they have a really hard time finding their voice. In a room of people, not online. What guidance would you give people um, to start using their voice and not be scared of rejection, not be scared of not let too much fear get in their way, come prepared like you're talking about, but use their voice.
I think in today's younger generations, with all the social media and the so-called transparency of their lives, posting everything online and blah blah blah. I mean, I really believe that a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, and people
Yeah.
will put things online in order to make other people jealous. Look at me, I'm living my best life, when it's, they're in a rented car and a rented suit and a rented hotel. I mean, it's bullshit. And so, authenticity seems to be in short supply.
Yeah.
And I would say, maybe authenticity isn't the fastest route to success, but I think it is the only route to success.
Yeah.
Um, and I think you have to be authentic, and you have to be patient. The way you opened our discussion this afternoon, was a reference to, people want to be the CEO on day one. Well,
Yeah.
I can assure anybody out there listening to the podcast, no, you don't. Use your younger years to learn and to grow and to meet older people and listen to what they did and pick what you like and reject what you don't. But the whole get rich quick thing and be successful in a flash thing, I don't think it exists. Notwithstanding the fact that if you spend a lot of time on social media, you would think, and maybe that's why depression is sort of rampant in our country. People are under the impression that everybody's more successful than them because they see it online, and they
Yeah.
see their posts on the internet and their pictures and their this and their that and their Instagram and their Facebook. You know, People don't post their bad days online,
Yeah.
but we all have them.
Yeah.
So I would caution people against looking for the quick success.
Yeah.
I built my career slowly and arguably too slowly, but I built it slowly, brick by brick, step by step, relationship by relationship. And it took a long time. But the success at the end of that journey is, I think, much more profound and much more stable,
Yeah.
because I I have I have some excess capital, if you will.
Yeah.
So if I make a mistake, or if I forget to somebody's name, or whatever, I mean, I think I've built enough of a foundation that I'm not going to tip over at the first breeze.
It's great. I loved. Thanks for sharing that. I'm a big fan, and it's of what you just said, and I think it's a really good reminder for everybody to enjoy the process, to enjoy the building blocks of learning the fundamentals. Going back to what you said, you have to live life to really learn things that you just absolutely cannot read in a book. The book, it's the hard knocks, just like you put it earlier in the talk.
Yeah, and you know what, John? I think there's so much emphasis on success today that the value of failure is overlooked.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You know, Failure is the best teacher. When you fall down and skin your knees, you learn a lot.
Yeah.
You learn about yourself. You learn about the business that you're in and how did it happen and why did it happen? Did I trust the wrong people? Was I inauthentic myself? Did I overspeak or misspeak? Those are great learning experiences. But nowadays, there is a generation, it seems, of people who don't want to hear about failure. They only want to hear about success.
Yeah.
And failure, failure is just a learning opportunity. Most failures are fairly fleeting. You make a presentation for a big client, you don't get it. You don't get the job. The business goes somewhere else. Okay, well, so what? That just means that you'll do better the next time, and you'll learn from try to post-mortem. What is it that went right in my presentation? What went wrong in my presentation? And try to do more of what went right and do less of what's wrong, and do better the next time.
Yeah.
But from my vantage point, and I'm not, I don't necessarily have the best vantage point into the Gen Z or the millennial or whatever the current buzzword is. But, from what I hear and what I read, it's kind of a fragile environment, where failure is, is so devastating to people.
Yeah.
But if, oftentimes on my Facebook, actually just before our call, I was watching a Facebook reel, and it was a young woman who was obviously giving some sort of a commencement address somewhere. I don't know where. And this is a theme I've seen a million times. Oftentimes, people who are asked to address crowds or audiences in those kind of commencements or motivational speeches, that kind of thing, these are people who talk about their failures.
Yeah.
And they talk about, this particular person was saying, it had been recommended that she enter a beauty pageant. And she did, and she lost. And then she entered the same pageant the following year, and she lost. And then she entered the same pageant the following year, and she went on 6 times and lost every single time until the 7th time when she won. And ultimately, she went on to be, I think it was either Miss America or Miss Universe or something. But it was interesting because her talk was about all of these failures. And I presume that from every failure, she learned resiliency and persistence, and to, keep an eye on your goals, and to continue to strive. And, her success was long in coming, but it was success, and probably more profound and more appreciated by her because of the struggle to get there.
Yeah.
That struggle is part of the human condition that keeps us, that makes us strong. Without the struggle, what are we?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was so well said. Yeah, that was so well said. What's a failure that you grew the most from?
Well, there was one, it was more of an insult than a failure. I had a partner who's no longer here at our firm, who many, many years ago said to me that I would never, ever build a book of business of my own. I was always going to, I was destined to work for other people my entire career.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, at that moment that he said that, building my own book of business wasn't even on my radar. I was trying to learn how to practice law.
Yeah.
And I always felt that the first thing you had to do was learn how to practice law. Then you build a book of business, not build a book of business and then practice law. So when he said that, I was really offended. And then it got me thinking that, well, I'm going to prove him wrong. And I did. And, it reminds me of Amon-Ra St. Brown, the great Lions wide receiver, who I love his story. And his story is, he can rattle off the name of every wide receiver drafted in, what was it, the 2020 one draft, all these receivers that went before him, and he memorized them, and he carried a list of their names around as a motivator. Yeah. And you know, he felt like he had been taken lightly and not appreciated, and that motivated him. And in the same way that I felt motivated by this statement as a very young lawyer, that, you know, the next 35 years of my career were going to amount to a hill of beans. Thank you very much. Thanks for your vote of confidence, and screw you.
You know, as you're talking about that, I remember in kindergarten I took a test, and the test was, it was going to tell you in kindergarten what you were going to be for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that.
Yeah, and so I came home and I opened it up, and it said that I was going to be a dock loader. That the only thing that I was, that's basically what it said. Like that, yeah. And I want to say it said basically no other options. And I remember as clear as yesterday, and I'm 52, laughing about it with my family. Yeah. Right? Like, how dare that, you know, my parents were so, how dare this test even say that? And then kind of fast forward, I took the ACTs in high school, and this was before you got this was before, I was never a test taker. I didn't know I was dyslexic in high school. And this was before you got a base of 14. I got a 7 on my ACTs. But, you know, I never let that stuff get to me. But there was always that I'll prove the test wrong feeling to it. And there is something about that drives you from those type of things.
Yeah, there's an author out there who I would never in a million years be able to pull up his name. And he talks about the education system and how bad the education system is, because it beats all of the critical thinking and all of the independence out of our kids.
Right.
And, you know, the ones that get along with the administration of education are the go along to get along people. And if you're in any way contrary to the system, they beat you down and beat you down and beat you down.
Yeah.
And yet those are the people that probably end up with the greatest amount of success. Not necessarily the kid who got the A+ in every,
right.
You know, I mean, I went to law school, and obviously, and I'm not sure that the most successful people in my class were the top of my class.
Yeah.
And some of the most successful people I've met, you know, clients and other people in the business, I mean, some of them aren't even college graduates.
Yeah.
But they're brilliant nevertheless. They understand life, they understand business, they understand money. They're fantastic and interesting people to get to know. And that's one of the things I love about my job, is you really get to know a lot of people like that. But it's rarely, you know, I can't ever remember meeting somebody who says, "Oh, I was the valedictorian of my class at Princeton." No, I never run into those people ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
You want to hear a funny story? Is I'm remembering this as I'm talking to you. I interviewed. I was a broker at Marcus and Millichap. I sold apartment buildings, which you know, for 6 years, and then I ran the office for 6 years. And so recruiting was a big piece. And I interviewed this guy once, and he was a Harvard grad, and he was top of his class. And so every question I asked him was like perfect, you know. So I said, and this was after the first interview, I said, "You know what? I can't hire you. You're not going to make it here." He's like, "I'm a Harvard grad." I said, "You don't have a learning disability. You've never had the struggle. You've never had anything that is going to drive you in this type of business. You know, you're an A student. You're not a C student." Like he thought he was in another reality that right. I said, you can't be a broker. Yeah. So that's
very interesting. Very interesting story. You're probably right. It was probably the right decision.
Right. I did him a favor.
He's probably the president of, you know, a Fortune 500 company.
Right. Exactly. Steve, talk a little bit about your real estate law, your practice, you know, the type of clients that you like to enjoy working with, and, you know, how people can connect with you.
So, you know, my practice is all things connected to real estate, from environmental risk management to financing, leasing on both the landlord and the tenant side, a lot of industrial property. And most of my clients are of the entrepreneurial sort, non-institutional, non-REIT, C students, with big ambitions who went out and made their own money. Those are more likely than not to be, my clients.
Yeah.
And that's why I like to deal with the decision makers. It's a whole lot more fun than dealing with a department head. And we have a good time.
And how can people get a hold of you? Phone number, email?
The phone number is 248-827-1861, maddinhauser.com, or sallen@maddinhauser.com.
I love it. All right, quick speed round, Steve. You ready?
I don't know. Maybe not.
A book, a TED Talk, or an article that's had an impact on you?
Well, the book that had the biggest impact on me was referred to me by our long ago great business coach, Jules Rappaport, blessed memory. It was called The E-Myth Revisited.
Such a great book. Yes.
It's about 130 pages long. I only read the first half, and it changed my life.
Yeah.
It just put me on a path to how to market myself as a lawyer.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I never even read the second half of the book, didn't need to, but it changed everything for me. And that was sort of the beginning of my proving that long ago partner who said, I'll never have a book of business, proving him dead wrong. And I began to follow the principles that were articulated there. Another interesting example, there was a book called, also a Jules recommendation, called How to Sell a Lobster. Do you remember that book?
He never recommended that book to me.
Okay. Well, it's a book called How to Sell a Lobster.
I
had just read that book literally days before I had an interview to possibly do some work for a company called Garden Fresh Salsa Company. This is probably back in about 2000. So, almost 25 years ago. And I had employed like every technique in that book in this interview with the gentleman that I met for the interview. He was interviewing attorneys, and I got the job. I got the assignment, I guess, if you will. I mean, I didn't take a job there. I was, their outside counsel, and it started about a 15-year run of being their general counsel. And for those of you who remember Garden Fresh Salsa Company, it was owned by a gentleman named Jack Aronson, or at least majority owner was a gentleman named Jack Aronson. It's a fantastic company, a fantastic product. And I rode with them the wave of building their company from about $5 million in sales when I met them to $100 million in sales when they sold their soup company back in 2015. It was absolutely a blast. I never would have gotten that job without doing the hard work, some of which I've described, of knowing people. Somehow I was on the list. I was on a list of somebody, I think in the city of Ferndale, they had a list of attorneys. Now, why I was on somebody's list of attorneys to refer to at the city of Ferndale, I have no idea. But that person at the city of Ferndale gave Garden Fresh my name, along with a list of a bunch of others. And the story goes that the fellow who ended up contacting me had called like the first 3 or 4 on the list and got, no answer or voicemail or whatever. And he finally, I guess he said to himself, well, working the top of the list isn't working. I'm going to work the bottom of the list. My name was at the bottom of the list. He calls me, and I answered my phone. And to this day, very often I answer my own phone, although Tammy sits outside my office and generally screens my calls. But to this day, if she's not at her desk, I answer my phone. And it's funny how many times someone will say, I'm so surprised that you answered your own phone. Answer your phone. Answer your phone. The worst that you can do is waste 2 minutes and you can hang up on somebody.
Yeah.
And nowadays with the telemarketers and all that, and all that, I get it. It's a pain. But never be too proud or too important to not be able to answer your own phone. And so I get the call, and he tells me the story about I'm the last guy on the list, but he called me and I answered the phone. So he says, "Can you come over next Tuesday, and make a little presentation to me and the CFO of the company?" And so I did, and it was such a fun ride to work
Wow.
with them and with them. Just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people.
Wow. That is a great story. I'm so glad that's a great story to end on, that you shared that story, because, we talked a lot about instant versus delayed gratification and what that means today. We talked a lot about old school is, more relevant today than ever before. And I hear, so, and I'm a business coach. I work with solopreneurs to Fortune companies, everything in between. And one of the things I hear across the board, no matter how big, small the company is people hear all the time the following: "Thank you so much for calling." People are saying, "Thank you so much for calling me back. I called blah, blah, blah people. Nobody called me back. Thank you so much for actually answering your phone."
Yeah.
And so your advice is the secret sauce. I love this podcast for this reason. I've known you for 22 years, but we get to talk about things and I get to hear stories that I wouldn't in just our normal kind of passing conversations. And everything you're talking about, I had asked you earlier, when did you wake up and say, "Hey, I'm ready to lead and be the president and CEO of Maddin Hauser"? But the through line of everything you talked about is, showcases your leadership and your ability to embrace the fundamentals and lead people. That's what it's all about. And I mean,
I think that's the key is, you either are a leader or you're not.
Yeah.
And there are many, many different styles of leadership. And I like sports as a metaphor for that. I always liked Steve Yzerman's style of leadership. He was a guy who was very quiet, almost painfully shy in front of the camera, but the greatest intensity on the ice.
Yeah.
When he was playing hockey, he was as intense of a competitor as I've ever seen. And I have season tickets to the Red Wings for over 30 years. So I've seen a lot of intense competitors on the ice, and he was amazing and amazingly intense and amazingly competitive, but he let his skills and his physical attributes do the talking. He didn't tell people how great he was. He just went out and was great.
Yeah.
And I think my approach to leadership is similar. I don't rah-rah. I don't try to, have meetings where I'm beating my chest and pounding the table. I try to build consensus, but I do lead by example. I mean, I have worked very, very hard, and I don't think anybody in my office would tell you anything other than Steve's a really hard worker and is always prepared and doesn't wing it. Preparation is key. And I think a guy like Steve Yzerman was always very, very prepared.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I love this talk. I appreciate everything that you shared. I just want to highlight a couple of things, which is authenticity is the route. Failure is the best teacher, and don't rush the process. Enjoy all the things that are in front of you, and learn as much as you can along the way. And mindset of making sure that you intrinsically go inward and don't pay much attention to things that people may say to you that are their opinion but aren't true, and don't own them. And you shared a lot today about just quiet leadership in the way that you do it, through your stories, through everything that you've done. I'm really appreciative of everything that you shared, from your grandfather to your father, to the iron workers, to your failures. This was great. I really, really, really enjoyed this talk.
Thanks, John. And by the way, I enjoy the fact that you obviously were listening.
Yeah.
Rattled it all off. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I want to kind of end with a little tribute again to Jules Rappaport, right? Who was your business coach for a long time. He was my business coach for a long time. I love him. I think of him, often. I hear his voice, often, kind of guiding me and telling me, guiding me and suggesting or telling or yelling at me.
Kicking you in the butt.
Right. But he was great. And so I'm glad that we, organically incorporated him into this talk, because I know we both have a lot of appreciation and gratitude and love for him. Any closing thoughts?
Can I offer one observation about Jules that I think is maybe a good wrap up is, the thing about Jules was what you did yesterday never mattered to him.
Yeah.
Always, what are you going to do tomorrow? So there was no resting on your laurels with him as your coach.
Yeah.
You walk into a meeting all full of piss and vinegar for what you did yesterday. He didn't want to talk about that. He wanted to talk about what are you doing tomorrow.
Yeah.
It was very humbling, but also motivating.
I have a lot of stories I can share with you of that exact framework with him. Yeah. That was great. Tell everybody, Steve, again, how to connect with you.
MaddinHauser.com or Sallen at MaddinHauser.com, 248-827-1861.
I love it. Steve, thanks so much. This was a great conversation. Think community, if Steve can help you, please reach out. I've talked a lot about this on the podcast. There are things that people see as an investment. There are things that people see as an expense. Sometimes people see an attorney as an expense. What we've talked about is it is always an investment for keeping you safe, keeping you in front of things, and the eyes and ears of somebody that can really help you, especially when it comes to real estate. If Steve can help you, or if you know of anybody that could use Steve's help, send them this podcast and let them get to know Steve. Steve, you're just a great guy, and I'm going to end one more thing with, I appreciate your kindness. I appreciate your kindness to me for the last 22 years. And thanks for all you do that you've done for me, that you do for your firm, and that you do for the community. So thank you so much. Think community, reach out to Steve if he can help. And if you want to reach out to me and talk about any coaching, you can reach me at johndwoskin.com. Thanks, everybody. Steve, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.